until you make the unconscious conscious. It will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Carl Jung's warning echoes through time like a ghostly whisper, unseen yet omnipresent, shaping destinies in ways most people never realize. The shadow, our hidden repressed self, lurks beneath the surface, manipulating thoughts, sabotaging dreams, and pulling strings from the darkness. Those who ignore it do not escape it. They are merely its puppets. Look around, and you will see the shadow at work everywhere. The man who brags of his virtue, yet secretly indulges in the very vices he condemns. The woman who preaches love and light while seething with unspoken resentment. The person who blames the world for their misfortunes, blind to their own destructive patterns. These are not coincidences. These are the unconscious forces at play, driving people toward their own ruin while they remain blissfully unaware. Jung did not speak of the shadow as some mere psychological theory. He saw it as a fundamental reality of human existence. It is the part of you that you refuse to acknowledge, the thoughts you suppress, the impulses you pretend do not exist. And yet, like a wolf lurking in the dark, it watches, it waits, and when it strikes, it does so with precision, often at the moment you least expect. Consider the ancient myths, those timeless stories that have warned us of the dangers of ignoring our darker nature. The tragic Greek hero who, in his arrogance, denies his flaws, only to be undone by them. The monster lurking in the depths, which only grows stronger the longer it is left unchallenged. These are not mere tales. They are reflections of a psychological truth. That which remains hidden does not disappear. It festers, it grows. And when it finally emerges, it does so with a force that can destroy everything in its path. Modern life has not made the shadow any less dangerous. On the contrary, it has made it more deceptive. Society rewards those who suppress their darkness, who present a perfect, curated version of themselves while burying their true emotions beneath layers of pretense. But the truth cannot be buried forever. The more you deny your shadow, the more power it gains. It seeps into your choices, your relationships, your failures. It is the unexplained anger that erupts without warning, the self-sabotage that ruins opportunities, the envy that poisons friendships. To ignore the shadow is not merely to be blind to a part of yourself, it is to be ruled by it. The unconscious does not negotiate. It does not care for your illusions of control. If you refuse to face it willingly, it will force itself upon you in ways you cannot anticipate. And when that moment comes, you will not recognize yourself in the chaos that ensues. And so, the question is not whether you have a shadow. You do. The question is, will you face it before it is too late? Most people will spend their entire lives running from their shadow, mistaking their carefully constructed masks for their true selves. But the more you run, the more you feed what chases you. The longer you deny your darkness, the stronger it grows in the depths, waiting for the perfect moment to reclaim its power. The shadow does not remain passive. It demands expression, and if it is denied, it finds its own way to surface. You see this in the man who lashes out in sudden, uncontrollable fits of rage, claiming he isn't usually like this. You see it in the woman who cannot explain why she keeps sabotaging her own relationships. You see it in those who dedicate their lives to condemning the very sins they themselves secretly commit. They are not in control. Something deep within them is. And yet, the true tragedy is not in these eruptions of unconscious darkness. The true tragedy lies in those who never even suspect that something within them is at war. They rationalize their misfortunes, finding external causes for every failure. They live in a prison of their own making, unaware of the key that has been in their possession all along. Jung understood this well. He knew that what remains unconscious does not cease to exist. It merely rules from the shadows, turning a person into a stranger to themselves. Imagine for a moment a person who suppresses their shadow so completely that they have convinced themselves they are wholly virtuous. This person will not only be blind to their own flaws, they will project those flaws onto others. They will become hyper-aware of evil in the world, calling out the darkness in others while failing to see it in themselves. They will grow intolerant, rigid, convinced of their own righteousness, and in their crusade against perceived wickedness, they will become the very thing they claim to despise. This is how the shadow rules best, by making a person think they are immune to it. But the shadow cannot be destroyed. It is a part of you as much as your kindness, your intelligence, your dreams. The only choice you have is whether you will integrate it or let it consume you from within. To integrate the shadow is not to become evil. It is not to surrender to chaos or indulge in destruction. It is to become whole. It is to know yourself so deeply that nothing within you remains unexamined, nothing within you remains unclaimed. It is to own your desires rather than be controlled by them, to understand your darkness rather than fall victim to it. Yet this is a terrifying process. To meet your shadow is to stand before a mirror that reflects not the person you wish to be, but the person you truly are. It is to confront the reality of your own hypocrisy, your own suppressed rage, your own unacknowledged weaknesses. Many will turn away. Many will retreat into the comfort of their illusions. But those who dare to look will find something else staring back at them. Something unexpected. They will find power. The greatest paradox of self-discovery is this: that which we fear most holds the key to our liberation. The shadow is not merely a reservoir of repressed urges and unacknowledged flaws. It is also the wellspring of our deepest potential. Beneath its chaos lies a force that, if harnessed, transforms the fragmented individual into something whole, something unstoppable. But to reach this power, one must be willing to descend into the abyss. Most will not. Most will choose the well-lit path of convention, clinging to their fragile sense of virtue, terrified of what they might find if they look too closely at themselves. Society encourages this blindness. From childhood, we are taught to filter our emotions, to suppress our instincts, to discard the parts of ourselves that do not fit within the accepted mold. We are rewarded for conformity, for politeness, for self-restraint. And so the shadow grows in silence, hidden beneath layers of learned propriety. And yet, it never truly disappears. It waits, finding expression in the most insidious ways. It reveals itself in the man who devotes himself to altruism, but inwardly seethes with resentment at the people he helps. It reveals itself in the woman who prides herself on kindness, yet secretly enjoys tearing others down under the guise of concern. It reveals itself in the seemingly perfect citizen who follows every rule, only to be plagued by violent dreams, inexplicable anxieties, and a lingering sense that something inside them remains unmet. To ignore the shadow is to live a divided life. The conscious mind believes one thing, but the unconscious whispers another. The tension between these two realities creates suffering, an invisible war that manifests as self-sabotage, anxiety, depression, or a slow, creeping sense of dissatisfaction with life. Many seek to drown this suffering in distraction, in substances, in compulsive behaviors that offer temporary relief but never a cure. Others project their inner conflict outward, blaming the world for their misery, seeing enemies where none exist. But those who dare to turn inward will find that the shadow is not the enemy they feared. It is the part of themselves they abandoned long ago. It is the passion they repressed in favor of appearing controlled. It is the ambition they denied to avoid seeming arrogant. It is the raw, unfiltered power they buried because they were told it was dangerous. And it is dangerous. Dangerous to the illusions that keep a person weak. Dangerous to the false self that masks their true nature. The moment one begins to integrate the shadow, a transformation begins. Fear turns to strength. Hesitation turns to conviction. The fragmented self begins to unify. Yet integration is not an intellectual exercise. One cannot simply read about the shadow and claim mastery over it. It must be confronted directly, experienced viscerally. It must be dragged from the depths, examined in the light, and finally, embraced. Only then does a person cease to be ruled by unconscious forces. Only then do they begin to wield the power that has always been theirs. The deeper one ventures into the psyche, the clearer it becomes. Repression is never a solution, it is merely a delay. What is buried does not decay, it festers. The more a person suppresses their shadow, the more insidious its manifestations become, and nothing is more deceptive than the illusion of control. A man who prides himself on his unwavering discipline, who suppresses every impulse, may believe he has mastered himself. But in reality, he has merely imprisoned a part of his being. His anger, his desires, his wild and untamed nature, these things do not vanish. They hide in the corners of his mind, waiting for a moment of weakness, a moment when his perfect facade cracks. And when it does, the floodgates open. The outburst that follows is not proportional, it is catastrophic. This is how so many seemingly righteous men fall. The priest who preaches purity is found indulging in secret vices. The politician who speaks of morality is caught in corruption. The man who boasts of loyalty is consumed by forbidden temptations. It is never the conscious self that betrays them. It is the shadow, demanding to be acknowledged in the only way left to it. But these eruptions are only the extreme cases. For most, the shadow expresses itself in smaller, quieter ways. Self-sabotage, indecision, unexplained anxiety. The artist who refuses to create for fear of imperfection. The lover who ruins every relationship before it can truly begin. The individual who stays trapped in mediocrity, unable to break free, yet unsure why. This is the true cost of ignoring the shadow. It does not merely haunt, it binds. It ensures that a person never fully realizes their potential, never steps into the full force of their being. They remain half awake, half alive, forever haunted by a sense that something is missing, yet unable to name it. And so, the only path forward is through confrontation, to turn toward the darkness instead of running from it, to ask the difficult questions: what do I truly desire? What am I truly capable of? What have I abandoned in order to be accepted? The answers are not always comfortable, but they are necessary. Because the shadow is not just the sum of one's repressed darkness, it is also the key to one's greatest strength. Within it lies creativity, passion, resilience, the fire that was extinguished in the name of obedience. To integrate the shadow is not to become a monster. It is to become whole, to reclaim what was lost, to take the raw, untamed energy lurking beneath the surface and forge it into something unstoppable. But few will take this path. Most will continue to suppress, to ignore, to deceive themselves into believing that their carefully constructed masks are enough. And for a time, they may succeed. But in the end, the shadow always finds a way to make itself known. The only question is whether it will be acknowledged willingly, or whether it will erupt when least expected, shattering the illusion of control in the most violent way possible. There is a reason why so many fear the depths of their own psyche. To turn inward is to risk seeing something they do not wish to acknowledge, and yet what is ignored gains power. The more one resists, the more the shadow pulls the strings from behind the curtain. It does not vanish, it waits. Every man who suppresses his rage convinces himself that he is virtuous, that he has conquered his baser instincts. But this is a lie. The anger does not dissolve, it mutates, it transforms into passive aggression, into self-pity, into an unconscious attraction to situations that will inevitably provoke it. He finds himself in relationships that frustrate him, in jobs that diminish him, in patterns of behavior that ensure his resentment never ceases to grow. And then, one day, it erupts, not as a controlled expression, but as a volcanic force destroying everything in its wake. The outburst feels alien, as though it does not belong to him. He tells himself, that wasn't me, but it was him. It was the part of himself he refused to acknowledge, the part he believed he had defeated. But rage is only one form of the repressed shadow. Desire, too, when denied, does not simply disappear. It festers in the unconscious, twisting into something darker. It is no coincidence that the most puritanical individuals so often harbor the most depraved secrets. The shadow does not care for social masks. It only demands to be seen, and when ignored, it forces itself into awareness through dreams, fantasies, or compulsions that seem to arise from nowhere. To reject one's desires is to make them more powerful. To reject one's flaws is to let them control from the darkness. And yet, this is what society encourages. Pretend to be good. Pretend to be righteous. Pretend to be something other than what you are. But no man can lie to his own nature forever. The reckoning always comes. It is not that the shadow should be indulged blindly. This leads to chaos. It is that it must be understood, integrated, made conscious. Only then can its energy be transformed, its potential harnessed. Jung did not warn against the shadow because it was evil. He warned against it because its rejection is what turns it into something dangerous. The man who accepts his own capacity for rage is less likely to lose control. The man who acknowledges his desires is less likely to be ruled by them. The man who understands his own darkness is the least likely to become its victim. And yet, most will choose to live in ignorance. Most will continue to wear their carefully constructed masks, believing they are safe. The man who denies his own darkness does not escape it. He simply ensures that it will find expression in ways beyond his control. This is the cruel irony of repression. The more one fights against the shadow, the more cunningly it manipulates events from beneath the surface. The more one insists on their innocence, their virtue, their moral superiority, the more their unconscious conspires to prove them a liar. Look at the man who preaches humility, yet cannot bear criticism. Look at the woman who claims to despise gossip, but thrives on quiet slander. Look at the leader who presents himself as the champion of justice, only to fall victim to the very corruption he once condemned. These are not accidents. They are inevitabilities. The shadow has no tolerance for hypocrisy. It will bring the truth to light, one way or another. And when it does, it will not be gentle. It will force itself into awareness through crisis, through humiliation, through suffering. It will shatter the carefully crafted image one has built and expose the chaos beneath. This is why the shadow is so often met with fear, because to confront it is to confront one's own self-deception. And most would rather cling to a lie than face the terror of their own contradictions. But to suppress the shadow is to live half a life. It is to exist in a constant state of self-policing, terrified of what might emerge if one lets their guard down. It is to smile while seething with resentment, to nod while screaming internally, to perform righteousness while secretly longing for transgression. This is not virtue, this is self-imprisonment. Yet the world rewards this kind of self-deception. Society prefers the man who pretends to be good over the man who truly understands his own darkness. It favors those who conform, who suppress, who maintain the illusion of purity. But illusions always shatter, and when they do, the cost is far greater than if the truth had been acknowledged from the start. Jung understood this. He knew that ignoring the shadow did not make one righteous, it made one fragile. It made one vulnerable to unconscious impulses, to sudden outbursts, to compulsions that seemed to arise from nowhere. He knew that the more one denied their own capacity for darkness, the more likely they were to project it onto others. The man who refuses to see his own evil will always seek an enemy onto whom he can cast his sins. He will see demons in the world because he refuses to see them within himself, and so his life becomes a battleground. He fights against the very things he secretly desires. He condemns the very sins he secretly wishes to commit. He becomes a creature of contradiction, a living embodiment of the war between repression and reality. And the more he fights, the more the shadow tightens its grip. But what if he stopped fighting? What if, instead of denying his darkness, he turned to face it? What if he dared to look upon his own capacity for destruction and said, "Yes, this too is me"? What if, instead of being ruled by his shadow, he learned to master it? This is the path Jung laid before us. Not the eradication of darkness, but its integration. Not the pursuit of false purity, but the acceptance of wholeness. For only the man who embraces his shadow can ever hope to be free. Like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more epic content. Cheers!